Hey everybody, Mature Simmer here. So the background you're going to see is going to be the same video that was the haul this morning. That I talked about this to begin with in general terms to introduce, but it's going to be the same run. It's just the audio that you're going to hear is me simply talking as we're going over what I'm quite excited about. So 3 days ago, so at this point, when you see this, it will be 4 days ago. The GDC announced on their Patreon site a CSE engine progress update, Core Simulation Engine. And they're calling this Core Simulation Engine 2 because obviously there's already a core simulation engine operating within the GDC economy mods as it is. Now, they make it pretty clear that this is looking forward and showing a behind the scenes and also trying to get people as excited as they are. And so, what I'm going to do is read you this update, intersperse it with my thoughts on what is covered, and think of this as a preview of something I'm pretty excited about. And I talked about in the video this morning, I'm currently a mid-level Patreon subscriber. Done that because of a membership discount that they offered that I'm like, all right, I'll go ahead and I'll give them a shot. But like anything with any of these things, I'm a consumer, I'm a customer. I'm looking to see if I'm giving this money, do I feel it's worthwhile for me? Am I getting something that I value in enjoyment and time and so forth? Um, how this goes and so forth is going to be part of that evaluation over the remainder of the year to determine if I continue my support or not, and to some degree versus a paid review or a hey, they gave me access to it early, whatever, and therefore they bind me in some way. I am not a fan of those type of reviews because I do think folks are not truthful and are not as transparent as they likely should be. You don't hear a whole lot of people with early access saying this thing sucks. Don't waste your money. Don't do whatever. The best they ever get is you just don't hear a whole lot of enthusiasm from them, but they try to stay neutral behind the veil of you make up your mind on your own. Even people that I really like in the flight sim community, like A330 Driver and folks like that, I just feel their message has been tainted by that kind of lukewarm review process. What you're going to get from me is what I feel about it. You don't have to agree with it. I'm going to try to give you the information of why I feel that way you feel differently. Go do what you want to do. Go spend your money the way you want to spend it. But if I'm feeling something is off, I'm going to let you know. I did also share in the video this morning. I have been impressed, and part of the reason I've done what I've done and agreed to throw some money this way, uh, these guys are doing some cool stuff. I like what I'm seeing. I love the traffic behavior mod. That's kind of what got me up to the mid tier, because to get in the beta and start playing with that, you needed to step up to the mid tier. Shared in the morning video. I'm not a huge fan of that either, but I get it. The other Patreon stuff I do, they don't play that game that way. It's kind of like you're a paid subscriber, you get access to the paid stuff. I mean, I can agree adding a few perks like the difference in the discounts on the fuel cards or so forth. Fine. You want to throw a bone to people that are throwing you more bones, go for it. But the mods and access to certain mods, not quite sure why that decision is what it is. Again, my view is I wouldn't do it that way if it was me, but they've done it, and obviously I could have just said, screw them, I'm not that interested. But the traffic behavior was something that was just driving me up a wall. And I think anybody who plays, as much as I've done, where I've done a couple thousand hours across both of the truck sims, you know how sucky the AI behavior is that SCS has out there. So a fix for that, and they had impressed me enough with their economy mod and the thoughts behind it that I'm like, all right, I'll give them a shot. And I've been very happy with what I've seen. That is a big part of what leads me in with the mindset that I have is this got talked about, because I'm pretty bullish on what I've seen, and so you're going to hear that here, but I'm going to elaborate. So let's just jump in because this is lengthy. I have no idea how long this is going to be. I might have to loop the video because it takes longer, but it's here if you want to look at it and you want to get my honest take on it. So they start with where we are, what's built, and why this update matters. Hey everyone. We wanted to share a clearer update on the CSE2 Core Simulation Engine version 2 and how it's shaping the next major update to our realistic economy mods, version 1.58. Quick heads up, this is going to be a bit of a read, but it's the best way for us to explain what we've been building and why this update is such a big step forward. Before we go any further, a quick explainer for anyone who may be new. CSE is the system that runs the economy behind the scenes. Instead of relying on a collection of static values and disconnected rules, CSE acts as the brain of the economy, looking at freight, time, seasons, and conditions together, then deciding how the economy should behave at that moment. In short, CSE doesn't just change numbers, it decides why those numbers change. Now, at the core, for me, that is a huge, huge thing. I think a lot of things, and some of it is the limitations of what a modder has access to and can do. So I'm not smacking on modders in general, like, hey, these guys don't think things through, and I get there's some real world roadblocks and so forth, but I do feel a lot of times we kind of get what we would call in the software industry an MVP, a minimum viable product. It does what it needs to do. It makes things work. It pushes the right buttons, lights up the right lights, and there's not a whole lot of thought behind it. It's just, hey, I got stuff working and it works pretty well, and this is good enough. That's the whole point of an MVP. It's the minimum that you can put out. It's the bare minimum. Maybe it's sloppy, maybe it's lazy, maybe it's just all that can be done, maybe it's a combination of everything and more. We all make up our own minds as we consume these products. But that concept is my whole driving aura, essence, whatever you want to call it, of why I love really good in-depth sims. I want a sim that is not just arcadey. I want something that's really making something matter. That's why I like career things in Flight Sim. That's why I love the GDC economy mods here, because, within the limitations, they're doing things that make trucking matter rather than it's just, okay, each session I sit down, I'm just driving a truck and they're all unconnected. I'm trying to find something that gives me that feeling of connectedness. So that verbiage is right up my alley. Now, go back to what they're saying. Important note up front, and this is key. This update has not been released yet. That is in bold. What you're reading here is again, bold, behind the scenes sneak peek. So both of those are bolded at what's coming as development continues. New features that are described below, I've added are, they don't have that. It just has that described below, so just grammatical typo, are not live in the public build, mod version 1.57. This post is meant to keep you informed, set expectations, and build excitement for what's ahead. So that's part of why I'm sharing this is yes, I'm pretty excited about what I read. I have read through this whole thing, and I felt it was worth taking some time to share it with my community so that people are aware if you haven't seen this. Now, coupling all that together, I go back to their first paragraph. It's shaping the next major update to our Realistic Economy Mods version 1.58. They talk about here, you're going to see wording and so forth about how long this takes. This is still there. This is behind the scenes. But it seems that they're like, this is going to come out with 158, which seems fast. So I'm not sure if I'm misreading that or not, but that's my gut right now is we might see it within the 158 release. Maybe not upon the first release of it, but maybe, a week or two later. I don't know. But it doesn't seem like it's that close, but it was, and maybe it's just explaining what they're doing in the background, and it's affecting, because it does say how it's shaping the next major update to our Realistic Economy mods. But this is a core of those mods. So that's where there's a bit of confusion on my part there. But, all right, going back to what they say. While earlier versions of the economy already used CSE in some form, this update represents a major evolution of that system. The goal isn't to replace what already worked, it's to bring everything under one unified engine so the economy behaves more consistently, more realistically, and more safely than ever before. We've now completed phases 0 through 3 and are actively working on phase 4, which is where all of these systems begin to fully come together. So again, keep that in mind as we go through this information. 0 through 3 are completed. So when we cover what 0 through 3 are, those are done and they're working on phase 4. So that's from that point forward is what's left until they can release this thing. Again, everything sounds awesome there. It's the right tone. It's the right language for someone like me who's looking for deep sim involvement. But as I said in the morning video as well, I come from the IT community. I know vaporware really well. Promises can be made, and then the reality once you get your hands on something can be far, far from that. So I'm trying to temper the excitement with a bit of that. But again, you're going to hear some of that as we go through it. I'm going to give you my honest opinion as it sits as of this recording. So what's been completed so far? Phase 0. Stability, transparency, and profile safety. Now we're going to go through each phase. I'm going to read everything they have in its entirety for the phase. For the most part, I think phase 3's got a lot in it, so I might break that one up. But phase 0, I'm going to read through everything and then I'll go back and just make comments on things that jumped out for me. Phase 0 was about rebuilding the core of the economy system so everything that comes after it is safe, predictable, and trustworthy. This phase didn't change how the game looks or feels on the surface. Instead, it fixed the underlying problems that can cause unstable updates, inconsistent behavior, or save-breaking edge cases. What this means for players: much safer economy updates. Changes are now applied in a controlled, repeatable way. This dramatically reduces the risk of updates causing unexpected behavior or profile-breaking changes. Clear visibility into what changed and why. Every update now generates clear summaries and warnings for our team internally, allowing issues to be caught early instead of slipping into live releases. Problems are identified before players ever see them. Fewer silent or accidental balance shifts. Phase 0 prevents small unintentional changes from cascading into large balance problems. If something changes, it's deliberate and traceable. Better compatibility with mods and future expansions. The engine now understands exactly what content it's working with and where it came from. and what makes it far easy which makes it far easier to maintain compatibility across updates and mod combinations. From a player perspective, Phase Zero is the reason future economy updates can be larger, smarter, and more ambitious without becoming risky. This phase doesn't add features. It makes sure every feature that follows can be delivered safely and consistently. So, the things that jump out for me, trying to avoid save breaking edge cases, things like that. They also then talk about profile breaking changes. That's a big deal when you're doing something, especially again, when I'm using an extreme economy mod and is, I've just gone, it takes me dozens and dozens of loads to move up a level. And I'm sure that's only going to increase as I go. The last thing I want is a year in, they make some change and the whole thing blows up and I've got to start over again because I can't continue, because I can't stay on the old version unless, again, we've talked about with the maps and stuff. If I perpetually sit in a state of stasis and say, all right, I'm never going to upgrade from 157, I'm just going to live here for the next 10 years, and everything that comes out after, I'm just going to forego and never use. Yeah, I can do that. But that's not what anyone is looking for. You still want to get things updated, but you want to be able to keep going in something that is intended to be long term. And so, again, with the Extreme Edition economy mod, like when you're mimicking what they say is a 25-year career, saves being broken would be a big, big problem for that, because you're going to have a similar type of investment, yes, on a gaming simming level versus a real life level, but it's still a lot of time put in and going through that. Now, the other thing that jumped out at me that was really important is the fewer silent or accidental balance shifts, where they talked about unintentional changes from cascading into large balance problems. They use the word unintentional, so this might be a little bit different than the way I look at it. But as I guide teams and as I talk about strategy with folks, a lot of the things I hear from businesses all the time is, oh, this was an unintended consequence. And the statement I give to leadership of those businesses is, the only reason it's an unintended consequence is you didn't think about the problem enough. And so what I'm seeing in this language is that they're trying to avoid doing that. Again, can it be done perfectly? Can you think of everything? No. But you get a lot further by knowing that you're thinking about it and trying to avoid it than by just not doing anything and then throwing out the excuse of, oh, that was an unintended consequence. We didn't expect that to happen. When we changed that law, or we moved that street light, or we put in this new fee at the government, we didn't realize it was going to have that impact. Yeah, because you didn't think about it. So this shows me they're thinking about it, which again moves them up, in my view, from what happens, frankly, with a lot of modders. If we're going to be upfront, they're just trying to get some things done, and they're not thinking this deeply about it. So let's move on now to phase 1. Phase 1, the economy actually understands what you're hauling. Phase 1 was about teaching the engine to correctly understand what freight actually is, instead of treating every job as just another entry with numbers attached. Before this phase, many systems worked, but they didn't always agree with each other. Freight might pay one way, behave another way, and be treated inconsistently across updates or cargo packs. Phase 1 fixed that at the root. What this means for players: freight types are now treated consistently across the entire economy. Similar cargoes behave similarly in pay, availability, handling expectations, and future systems that depend on them. You're far less likely to see one cargo act like an outlier for no clear reason. Specialized and sensitive cargo is recognized as such. Things like hazardous materials, refrigerated goods, time sensitive loads, heavy equipment, or fragile cargo are no longer just flavor. The engine understands these differences and uses them everywhere they matter. Fewer weird edge cases and balanced surprises. Phase 1 makes it much harder for strange or broken cargoes to slip through unnoticed. If something doesn't fit cleanly, it's flagged early instead of quietly affecting gameplay. Much better compatibility across updates and cargo packs. Because the engine now has a clear shared understanding of freight, changes in one area are far less likely to cause unexpected behavior elsewhere. A stronger foundation for everything that comes after. Distance rules, operating costs, maintenance, driver behavior, market shifts. All of these later systems rely on Phase 1 to speak the same language. From a player perspective, this phase is why the economy feels more intentional instead of patched together. Jobs don't just exist, they make sense in context. You may not see Phase 1 directly on a single job screen, but you feel it everywhere. In fewer oddball offers, in smoother balance across updates, in systems working together instead of fighting each other. This phase doesn't rebalance the economy on its own. It makes sure the economy can be expanded, refined, and improved without things falling apart. So, again, there's a lot here, which, again, is part of what really was building my excitement. And again, we're only in Phase 1, and they're done with 0 through 3. So, keep this in mind. All right. But again, working in this industry to some degree on the backside, where we're helping trucking companies do things, and manage these loads and so forth. This behavior is perfect and it's key. And again, it shows that, as they've said, they've worked in this economy, they've been a long haul trucker, they understand this world. Like, I can back this up with, having worked in this space for almost 10 years at this point, and then on the exterior of being, more of a shipper on the other side for another 20. Similar cargoes behave similarly. I can't express how important that is. I mean, the reason a trucking company will specialize in certain commodities is exactly that. There are nuances between refrigerated goods, between food versus shipping flowers. They're both refrigerated, but they're very different. In ways that may not be apparent from the outside. They're both shipping on reefers and dry van reefers, but what's inside, how they're loaded and so forth, just there's differences. And so again, are they going to get that deep into things? Not necessarily. Do they have to? Not necessarily. Again, all we're simulating is the economy. We're not actually loading the truck. We're not doing whatever. We're not having to weigh it out and make sure everything's balanced, like that works in the physics mod, this, that, and whatever. But I have absolutely seen things in the base game or in other economy mods where it's like, okay, the oil always, the petroleum hazmat stuff's always more than the paint, and but yet over here it's a weird price. Why is it giving me this, really high price here, or this really low price? The outliers they talked about. And the specialized sensitive cargo is recognized as such. Once again, there are people that will do those specialized loads because they do pay more. They always pay more. And in the game, they've done that a little bit, but they don't necessarily do it consistently. And a lot of the times it's just, well, it's fragile, so we're going to raise the price a little bit here and there. What I'm going to be looking for once we have our hands on this thing is, do I feel exactly what they're talking about, where it feels more intentional? The one thing I will say, like, I don't use cargo packs right now. It doesn't mean I won't. I'm happy with the various cargoes that are out there. Um, so I can't really speak to how that behaves right now in the sim because it's not something I have experience with. But what I'm seeing there is, once again, they're going to be doing things, behind the scenes, where they'll set up the engine to understand, okay, this cargo type is in this general class, a commodity class. And so I want the economic rules for that commodity class to apply to it. And it's less important what it's called as the specific item than what the general type of thing is. Um, and again, the fact that they're building on things being consistent, less unexpected behavior, all of that, really, really solid stuff. So really excited about that. All right, phase two's a little bit longer. So phase two, the economy starts making decisions. Elements of this phase existed in earlier versions of CSE. Seasonal changes, market adjustments, and real-world data inputs were already part of the economy. What's different now is how advanced, consistent, and unified that logic has become. Phase two is where the economy stops behaving like a collection of loosely connected adjustments and starts acting like a single decision-making system that reacts to conditions in a controlled, predictable way, while still remaining grounded in real-world data. Instead of relying on scattered tuning or constant manual tweaks, the engine now evaluates how strong or weak the market actually is at a given time, then applies that decision everywhere it matters. Independent national averages by trailer type. One of the biggest upgrades in Phase 2 is that the economy can now maintain separate national averages, rates per mile, for different trailer types. In practical terms, this means van freight no longer has to behave like reefer freight. Open deck and specialized loads can follow entirely different market patterns. Bulk, tanker, and other equipment types can have their own economic baselines. Each trailer family can now have its own expected rates and availability at a national level instead of everything being pulled toward a single average. At the same time, CSE is designed to be fully automated while still allowing intentional manual control when needed. This gives us the ability to set or adjust national averages per trailer type, van, reefer, open deck, bulk, etc. Correct specific cargo rates or probabilities without destabilizing the market. Preserve design intent while still letting the simulation do the heavy lifting. Automation defines the structure of the economy. Manual control lets us fine-tune it responsibly. What this means for players. Different trailer types now feel like different markets. Running a van, a reefer, or a flatbed no longer feels like the same job with a different trailer attached. Each has its own rhythm, demand, and earning potential. Good months and bad months feel intentional. Freight demand rises and falls for clear reasons, combining real-world signals with in-game conditions instead of feeling arbitrary. Seasonal effects are meaningful, not cosmetic. Winter slowdowns, holiday pressure, and seasonal cycles influence both pay and ability in ways you can actually feel. Pay and job availability move together. When the market tightens, work becomes scarcer and margins shrink. When demand rises, the market feels busy and rewarding without turning chaotic. Patterns you can recognize and plan around. Because the logic is consistent and data-driven, players can learn how the economy behaves over time and make smarter decisions instead of reacting blindly. Fewer unexplained swings. Big changes don't happen without cause. If the economy shifts noticeably, it's because conditions changed, not because of hidden or accidental tuning. From a player's perspective, Phase 2 is the reason the economy feels more grounded in reality, more predictable without being static, easier to understand and trust. This phase doesn't make the game harder or easier. It makes it smarter, more structured, and more believable, while still giving us the control needed to keep the economy balanced and enjoyable over time. So again, when I look at this from what I'd be looking for in a deep mod, like what they're saying this is going to be, I'm seeing them strike all the right notes. Absolutely national averages by trailer type. We talked about it in phase 1. Like, there are truckers that will specialize in certain things because of exactly that. Their area where they like to haul, all of that fits, and it does what they need to do. It doesn't seem that they're going to be moving things in a whipsaw manner. It's going to feel like an economy, but they're going to be able to tweak things. And it sounds like what they talked about is, where this is where they're deviating from the basis of what the game does. They talked about freight types. I'm sorry, that's phase 1. So there's a lot of stuff here. That it's not the same job with a different trailer attached, that they feel like different markets. I've heard that over and over from different trucking companies, like the fuel market, it has these nuances. Forestry market has these nuances. The ag market has these. Livestock has these. There are different things that move different markets, i.e., different trailers as well. There are guys that, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had about tarped loads. That's going to come up later in a later phase. They talk about, I think, things that will address stuff like that. The amount of tie downs you need. There are folks, I've talked with folks who transport $1 million engines for aircraft and things like that have to be very, very secure, very, very certain that they're going to get there, and so forth. Short time frames, this, that, but yet massive amounts of work by the driver to get things done. They're starting to talk about dealing with some of this stuff. So really, really, really interesting what they're looking at. Now, again, phase 3, I might kind of comment as I go, because this is probably twice as long as the last one. Again, they've completed this, so this is the last one that they've completed. Phase 3, freight that takes the right amount of time and goes the right distance. Phase 3 focused on 2 things that directly shape how jobs feel to play: how long freight realistically takes to handle at terminals, and how far different types of freight should reasonably travel. Instead of treating every load the same, this phase makes freight behave more like it does in the real world, without adding micromanagement or breaking game limitations. More realistic loading and unloading, terminal operations. American Truck Simulator uses a single time value to represent both loading and unloading. So we've seen that in the game whenever and again, not in the Extreme Economy series, because I don't own a truck yet. But if you've watched me run other things, there are the loading and unloading screens that they added, I think, somewhere in the 1.4 cycle, where it takes like 45, 50 minutes. I've never really looked exactly what it is, but I think that's what they're talking about with that single time value. It doesn't matter what the load is, it's going to move the time forward that same amount on load and unload. And so now we go back to what they're saying. We can't set them independently, so phase 3 solves this intelligently. The engine now determines which side of the operation is most likely to be the real-world bottleneck for each cargo type, load heavy versus unload heavy, and biases the shared time toward that reality. Just as importantly, phase 3 accounts for how players actually experience time in-game. At pickup, players see a loading screen that clearly signals time passing. At delivery, time advances instantly with no loading screen. Because long handling times feel very different depending on where they happen, phase 3 avoids extreme time jumps that would feel unfair at delivery, while still preserving realistic handling durations. What this means for players. Heavier complex freight feels slower and more involved at terminals. Simple or high throughput freight moves more quickly. Seasonal conditions can lengthen handling time naturally. Rare delays exist, but they're controlled and reasonable. Handling time now feels realistic, readable, and fair rather than arbitrary or punishing. So we're going to stop with that section there. This is exactly what I was alluding to in the last phase because, again, I've read this whole thing, so I knew this was here somewhere in the document. We talked about, again, tarping a load, specialized high value commodities that might be extremely heavy or extremely irregular in their configuration and therefore take many, many hours in some cases. I've talked to drivers who talk about taking 3 or 4 hours at the terminal getting everything set up because it is so complex. Now, the challenge I have here is they do talk about how they can't set the time independently, and they've explained it's a single time value that it uses. So, what I think I'm hearing here is let's say it's 50 minutes on each side. So, we have 100 minutes total between the load and unload. What they're going to do is skew those 100 minutes, and maybe at the load it's going to be 70 and it's only going to be 30 at the delivery. I think that's what I'm hearing. And they're working with the limitations they're given. Like if they can't change it, they can't change it. So us holding against them makes no sense. Like they are confined by the constraints that the sim puts on them, that the developer has put on them. So, what would make more sense is yes, when I'm doing something like that complex load, take 3 hours to load and then take 3 hours to unload. And that's got to be part of your calculation as a trucker who's choosing to take that job, that you start to learn those jobs do that. But it sounds like they cannot do that. Like it's going to be the 100 minutes or whatever it is, and they're just going to be able to manipulate it and split it differently. But that's going to be the limit of it. If that's what it is, then we get what we get. But it would be awesome if somehow they could make it seem longer. Because then they do talk about seasonal conditions lengthen handling time naturally. Heavier complex freight feels slower and more involved at terminals. Well, you have terminals at either end. You're delivering, you're shipping, you're picking up and delivering. So that would be, to me, it's the whole thing's going to be longer, but the confusing part is that they say they cannot manipulate that time. And so, it's set by the game and that's what they have to do. So I'm a little at odds there. That's where, again, until we have it in our hands and we're running it and then we can comment on what it feels like and what we're learning from it and trying to live with, it's going to be hard to go beyond that. All right, so the next section, freight that travels distances that make sense. Phase 3 also fixes how far freight is willing to travel. Instead of every cargo being equally likely to appear anywhere and go anywhere, the engine now applies realistic distance expectations based on what the cargo actually is. What this means for players, some freight naturally stays local or regional. Other loads are clearly meant for long-haul work. Cross-country jobs feel intentional, not random. Fewer immersion-breaking job offers. The job market feels structured and believable without locking players into specific routes or play styles. So, again, what I'm hoping for here, and a little bit of what I hear, is, again, there's going to be perishable loads, for example, and food's the most obvious. You're not, unless you have no choice. I mean, once again, it's certain times of the year. If you want avocados, they got to come from somewhere that they're growing avocados at. And the entire country being in winter and you want avocados, nothing's growing here. It's coming from some port somewhere. And if you're in Nebraska, like it's coming from one of the coasts, like it or not. It's not being grown somewhere locally and being transported 50 miles to get to you. It's going way longer. Again, are they going to adjust that for the season? Are they going to do stuff like that? Not sure. Um, and again, few immersion breaking job offers. Like I literally just ran a load in American Truck Simulator where I hauled moving containers from a manufacturing facility to a construction site. And you can hear in my commentary, I was trying to make up rational reasons for why it was happening when I picked it up, but I didn't know I was going to a construction site until I got there. And then when I got there, I'm like, okay, well, what I thought was happening is totally nuts, and we're just delivering these containers. And then I just tried to make up some other plausible story of what was in those containers or whatever. I'm assuming they're gonna eliminate the job engine offering loads that make no sense like that. Now, again, it's just fewer, and I appreciate that fact that they're not guaranteeing that nothing crazy is going to happen, because once again, it's impossible to test probably the thousands, hundreds of thousands of combinations that can occur. But, and again, things that are meant for long haul show up for long haul. You're not going to even see them on short things. So, moving construction equipment or something, who knows what it is. I mean, we'll see what it looks like when it plays out. But again, sounds really, really interesting. All right, next section of phase 3. Every trailer type is affected in different ways. Handling time and distance behavior now varies meaningfully across all trailer types, shaping how your day ends and what you take next. So once again, like this is where I'm a little confused, because it seems to indicate, well, I can change from the 100 minutes and make it 200 minutes or make it 30 minutes. But they said it wasn't changeable. So I'm not sure. But because when it says varies meaningfully, if it's still going to take me 100 minutes, all told, start or end, and it just moves a little bit, like, yeah, I can see that makes a little bit of a change, but I don't know that I'd call it meaningful. So I'm going to be curious how that all plays out. But they talk about now the different types. So van and reefer, food, grocery, cold chain, and high volume retail freight often moves through busy docks. Even though these loads drive efficiently, terminal time can be significant, especially during peak or seasonal periods. Again, dwell time from drivers and stuff like that. Oh my God, some of the stories that we have heard. Where they're waiting 6 hours and they get one load done all day because they're just waiting to get loaded for something that literally takes like 10 minutes to load. But there's so many vehicles there. The yard is just busy as all get out, and it's just that's what it is. So they know never to go there or try to avoid it if they can. Bulk tanker and dump. Silo fills, pumping, and tipping operations naturally take longer. These loads can noticeably advance the clock and require more planning for what comes next. Flatbed, open deck, and specialized. Securing, staging, or handling oversized and industrial freight often involves extended terminal operations. These loads feel like deliberate commitments, not quick turnarounds. So that's exactly the type of loads I was talking about earlier. Livestock and sensitive cargo. Careful handling and additional procedures are reflected in terminal time, making these loads feel distinct even when distances are moderate. Again, several trailer types, you got to have cleaning, you got to have washout, you got to have all kinds of things that happen that take time. But you're not necessarily, you might get paid, you might not get paid. It depends what your contract is, what the lane requirements are, and so forth. But anyway, why this changes how you choose jobs. Because terminal time and realistic distance behavior are now part of the equation, freight choice influences more than just pay. A quick turn retail van load may leave you positioned to grab another job immediately. A bulk tanker or specialized delivery might push the clock forward enough that your next move needs to be planned differently. Long haul work feels like a commitment that shapes your schedule, not just your route. Instead of only asking what pays best right now, players naturally start asking, what does this load set me up for next? That last statement is probably the one that got me the most excited about this entire thing. If they can pull that off and make it behave that way, that changes completely the way you approach the simulator. Um, that is what I am looking for. Like, that will be the payday. If they can make that happen, I'm going to be the biggest fan. But it is the one that right now carries the most skepticism for me. Now, again, they're saying phase 3 is done. So in theory, they've done this and they've done these things. But this whole phase 3 thing is really the thing that's got the most promise for me, but also the most questions and skepticism. So we'll see what the actual product brings. So finishing up phase 3, why phase 3 matters going forward. Phase 3 doesn't just improve today's gameplay. It creates a shared understanding of time and distance that future systems can build on. Costs, fuel usage, driver behavior, and profitability can now all rely on the same assumptions about how freight is handled and moved. From a player perspective, the takeaway is simple. Jobs don't just pay differently, they take different amounts of time and move different distances based on what you're hauling. This adds realism and depth without adding grind, restrictions, or micromanagement. So again, a big summary of what I've talked about. But like I said, if you can run this sim more like a business and have to think about it like a business owner, that's very, very different than what we've had in the game thus far. So let's see what happens. All right, so now phase 4. What we're working on now, phase 4, a unified money and ownership system in progress. Phase 4 is where many existing systems are being fully unified and significantly upgraded under the new CSE engine. These features existed before. The difference now is how deeply they're connected and controlled. More advanced maintenance and operating costs. Again, we're going to do this in pieces. I'm just scrolling here. Phase 4 is pretty long as well. Maintenance has always been part of the economy. Now it's much smarter. What's improved? Truck wear now reacts to the seasons. Summer heat and winter conditions are harsher on equipment. Maintenance pressure builds more naturally over time. For players, seasonal planning matters more. Neglecting upkeep has clearer consequences. Trucks feel like real machines operating in real conditions. Pretty straightforward with all that, but definitely, again, a big shift. Maintenance has kind of been, you see it go up 1% at a time. It's happening, but again, if they can fine tune this to, tires wear more in heat than cold. Engine wear changes different based on those conditions and the other systems that need to be running based on the temperatures. And once again, I'm assuming the maintenance pressure builds more naturally over time. You do have those situations where when things are wearing down, sometimes they start to wear a little quicker because things just are in poorer shape and so forth. So we'll see how that all feels and plays out. Okay, ownership and financial systems now fully engine driven. Buying, selling, and financing assets has always existed. Phase 4 brings trucks, trailers, and garages under full engine control. What's improved? Depreciation is more consistent across trucks, trailers, and garages. Loans and financing respond more clearly to economic conditions. Ownership costs scale more naturally in strong versus weak markets. For players, new versus used becomes a real strategic choice. Trailers and garages matter in long-term planning, not just trucks. Expanding too quickly in a weak market can create real pressure. Strong markets feel rewarding, weak markets feel tighter but fair. Ownership now feels like managing a growing operation, not just buying assets. Again, if they can pull this off and really do what they're saying here, this could be really, really cool. Far more advanced used truck market, engine driven evolution. The used truck market has existed in earlier versions of the economy, but in phase 4, it's no longer a partially isolated system with limited awareness of what's happening elsewhere. This update brings the used market fully under CSE control, allowing it to respond to the same economic forces that drive freight, costs, ownership, and inflation. Instead of relying on simpler logic or isolated rules, the used market is now shaped by overall economic conditions, seasonal trends, inflation and changes in purchasing power, supply pressure from new truck prices, ownership costs, and fleet turnover. What's more advanced now? Inventory rises and falls in response to real economic pressure, not just internal timers. Prices react more realistically to inflation, seasonal demand, and economic slowdowns. Market behavior changes gradually, forming trends instead of abrupt or artificial swings. Used prices are influenced by what's happening outside the used market, not just within it. What this means for players: timing purchases and sales matters more than before. Economic slowdowns can create genuine opportunities to buy. Inflation can push used prices upward even when demand is weak. Strong markets reward patience, while rushed decisions can be costly. The used truck market still does what players expect, but it now behaves like a true secondary market inside a living economy, rather than a predictable menu with rotating deals. So again, I'm hearing a lot of things there. There's nothing specifically that jumps out at me, but it sounds like they're going to have things tied together in ways that, again, we're really only going to be able to fully assess once we have some time to live in the world. So, we're going to be talking about that for sure as this starts to come available to us and we're using it. And, you'll hear about it in every one of my runs as we work through things of how things are feeling. All right. AI drivers now operate under real economic pressure. AI drivers have always generated income, but phase 4 fundamentally changes how reliable that income is. Under the new CSE engine, hired drivers now exist inside the same economic environment as the player instead of being insulated from it. This, again, is massive. If this works the way they're expecting it to, or the way they're talking about it, this will be really, really cool. What's more advanced now? Seasonal factors affect AI driver profitability and expenses, which now react more accurately to fuel prices, maintenance, and market conditions. Inflation affects operating costs tied to driver activity over time. Weak markets reduce margins instead of drivers acting as guaranteed profit. Strong markets allow drivers to perform better, but within realistic limits. What this means for players: hired drivers are no longer passive income machines. Driver profitability can fluctuate based on timing and conditions. Expanding a fleet too quickly can strain cash flow. Downsizing, pausing hiring, or waiting for better conditions can be the smart move. Drivers still work for you, but they now face the same economic pressures you do, just from a company driver perspective. Managing drivers becomes a strategic business decision, not a background task. So once again, this takes the simulation level to up another notch, because that has always been a complaint that I think anybody has had who's played this, is especially in the base game without an economy mod. Like, once you start hiring drivers, the goal of the game just basically becomes, every time I have $200,000, I buy a truck and hire a driver. And you just do that, and you just watch the money just roll and roll and roll. And it becomes almost pointless. It's like, at that point, you are just hopping in a truck and driving for the joy of driving, because you're making so much money from your company drivers, that like you really wouldn't have to drive. You could just basically, if you could just move the time forward and sleep constantly, you could just watch your drivers just make you profit, and that's it. And it's not saying, that wouldn't happen, but if they're under the same engine constraints, there's going to be challenges. Now, what I'm also hoping, because the thing I didn't like is the drivers also always just went out and back most of the time. So they would leave wherever the garage was, they'd take a load, and then they'd take a load right back into the city. And if there wasn't one, they'd return empty. That does simulate the fact that most drivers are coming home for rest or whatever, and that, that's normal. So that may not change. Um, but again, if the prices are changing and the economic model is happening, like, you may decide, you know, um, you're going to do things differently, but it will make for interesting conversations in the episodes, I'm sure. Right. So end phase 4, a coherent career loop. Once phase 4 is complete, the following all operate under one shared economic logic: freight behavior, operating and maintenance costs, asset ownership, trucks, trailers, garages, inflation and purchasing power, used equipment markets, AI driver profitability. This is the point where the economy stops feeling like separate systems stitched together and starts feeling like one connected living world. From a player's perspective, this is where I'm running jobs becomes I'm running a trucking business in a changing economy. Again, when we talk about, what I've always talked about when I drive, when I play these games or whatever, any sim, making it feel like you're doing what they're doing, that's the holy grail. If you can pull that off, and that's it. Like, if this starts to feel like you're running a trucking business, and yes, in the beginning with the mods, I'm doing these quick jobs, I'm probably going to be chasing being able to run a trucking business for a long, long time. So I might not be able to get to this for a bit. But that's part of what honestly has been motivating me the last few days to just keep getting these loads under my belt, because I want to be at the point when this comes out that I'm ready to own a truck in one of the series, if not both, and go from there. Because there's a lot of the economy mod that I'm not even experiencing yet, because as a quick job, you can't do certain things. So really, really interesting. And so the last piece here, what's next? Phase 5, making it safe for release. Before anything reaches players, Phase 5 focuses on stress testing and validation, catching extreme or broken values, ensuring safety, clean, controlled mod output. This phase exists so updates feel exciting, not risky. The big picture. When the updated CSE-powered economy goes live, the goal is for the game to feel more believable, more consistent, more reactive, more rewarding over long careers. Not harder, not grindier, just smarter. Thanks for your support. This update represents years of iteration coming together into a single unified system. It takes time, but it's what allows us to keep improving the economy safely and sustainably. Thank you for sticking with us while we build it right. That is the end of the announcement that they had. So again, I am hopeful that this will be a summertime type of thing, that we'll have this in 6 months. It might take longer. I don't know. Obviously, as more information comes out. So again, they finished 0 through 3. They just have phase 4, and then basically beta testing, quality assurance, and so forth. And again, I don't know if they're going to release that to folks in the community to play with or whatever. The problem, once again, is like, I don't have any place that I'm owning a truck and so forth. So I'm thinking, that's going to be people that are using easier mods, and I don't know that I want to deviate and spend time in there if I have an opportunity to do testing. Don't know that they're going to do it because this is before it reaches players. Like, they may have an internal group that they run this through and so forth. Don't know, but I've definitely got excitement around this. Let me know in the comments how you're feeling, what your thoughts are, and so forth. I know this was a long, long video to go through, but they provided a lot of information. And as always, I have a lot of opinions. So you've got them now. Let's have the conversation, and I will see you next time.